My name is Laju Iren. Some people call me A to ZL, many people call me Pastor PL. Some call me Mom as my children. My husband calls me Baby or Deary, one of the two. And then I'm also called the Lord Storyteller. I'm a filmmaker, also a book writing coach. I think that stories change our minds by targeting our hearts. So even if people cannot relate to Jesus, they can relate to love. They can relate to having an African parent. They can relate to loss. So we start from there and then we move to some of the things that we really want to share. When I was in primary school, I started writing poetry around that time. So I think I wrote my first poem when I was 8. Oh, Grandpa, up in the sky, it's just too early to say goodbye. Why should we, when we still meet up in heaven, the Lord God's bosom? So I think so. I think God has really kind of helped me in that direction, especially when it comes to writing and storytelling. It's been a joy and a passion of mine for a very long time. So poetry from a younger age. My dad liked to write. And he liked books. So I also really liked that. And then I think when we did my play when I was graduating from primary school, I wrote the play that
Wow.
that we acted then. And then secondary school, I was in drama. I also was writing poetry. Then university, I did mass communication for my first degree and my second degree. And I was also in drama. I think we were in mass comm together in CU. I think I was like a year or two ahead of you.
No, like you guys were graduating when I was in 100 level.
So then and then. So it's just really it's been a journey, and then just really knowing the Lord early also kind of made me, I think, very intentional about his stories from a very early age. But stories fascinate me, and I'm just really grateful to God for the opportunity to tell them.
Yeah. So like how you spoke about like knowing God early and how that's impacted your creativity.
Yeah.
How early are we talking about? How early would you
So
remember?
so I know that from when I was really tiny, my mom used to always take us to church. And she was one of those moms that church will close and you still be in church for a long time. And I know that around those younger ages, my dad wasn't even born again. He was a great guy, but he
Really?
wasn't born again.
Oh, wow.
So mom would say, we decrease our vision for daddy and we'll pray.
Wow.
And then just as I grew up, I saw our prayers working because eventually Daddy followed us to church one day and mommy said he came out for altar call
Oh
and
my
he's in fact he was telling me last week that he prays often with this prayer partner. So he's a very spirit cocoa person now. But I think officially making a decision for Christ, of course, that first initial decision, I think it was born out of fear. Because I had gone for a children's vigil in my church at the time because I love my home church. I learned a lot. But this particular vigil, you know what it's like to be as a child out of the house in the middle of the night. And then I think NEPA had taken light, so we're even using candle in the video. And then the children's just talking about hell.
Oh my.
So I'm like, no.
Wow.
I think I was about to enter GS1. I was just finishing primary 5 around that time. So I was like, please, I repent.
Oh
I'm born again. So, but eventually, even though the initial decision came from a place of fear, as I grew, I really got to know the Lord for myself. Because shortly after that, I went to GS1. And when I got to school, Federal Girls Benin, my sister was in SS1 and she was one of those fellowship girls. My immediate elder sister, I have two. And she was one of those fellowship
They're
girls.
the last one.
Yes, I'm the last of 3 girls. She was one of those fellowship girls who was always in fellowship. And so I kind of followed in her footsteps. And I think just before then, around GS1 to junior school, I also started speaking in tongues. So I think just having her mentorship and being in that environment, because the truth is that if you could stand up for Christ in my secondary school, you can stand up for Christ anywhere. I think some of the biggest challenges, quote and unquote, I faced when it comes to being persecuted for my faith was in
like
was in
kind of
boarding house.
persecution?
So I know that there's a particular case. My very good friend, still a friend now, she was a chief bridesmaid at my wedding. Both of us were the two like really spiritual people. And one way we wanted to kind of stand up for Jesus was we're not going to cheat in exams.
Okay.
So not even, some people see maybe asking questions during exams as not cheating, but taking papers inside as cheating. But we were just like, cheating is cheating. So we're not even going to whisper, say, what's number 1? What's number 2? And it was pretty annoying because I was kind of smart. And so many times during exams, you have people who will not sit down at the back of the class, and both of us would just sit in front and not speak to each other. And I think it kind of really helped me throughout my educational journey, apart from helping me spiritually and emotionally and even socially in terms of standing up for myself. But it also kind of helped me in terms of my studies, because I go into examination halls knowing is either I know it or I don't know it. And so it kind of really just helps me commit to the process of studying and giving stuff my best. So I can't remember the question, but I hope
No, my
with these few
question,
points of mine.
yes. My question was like, what kind of persecution you
Yeah,
face
so
in
there was a
school?
particular time, and then some people just hate you and choose to punish you as a junior girl because you're a fellowship girl. Then they're just little annoying things.
But they will
Then
be very big to you, like
yeah,
then.
but yeah, and then you also have your classmates who just say so. So I remember one time they were doing competition of who was the most annoying person in class, and they called someone, and somebody else said, "Why will you call that person when Laju is
Oh my
here?"
God.
So it was just things like that. But I think eventually, one thing I really learned is you can't really start a line if you are ashamed to stand alone. So just really choosing to do the right thing. And sometimes doing the right thing means that you're not one of many, which is still okay. Because eventually, as I grew, many times by SS1, SS2, SS3, even after graduation, you had people who'd maybe make fun of you for being a Christian now come to you as somebody that they can get advice from and look up to. And that's life.
And I feel like having that, I didn't even know this. Like, by the way, I've known PL since like
it's been a while.
And I felt like I know a little bit about your story. Like you said before this, like there's nothing dramatic or anything.
Yeah.
But still, having this kind of experience in secondary school, I feel like people really undermine the impact of those 6 years in secondary school. Like it can really determine a lot.
I think it had such a great impact on me that many of my dreams are still secondary school dreams. Like, so I think psychologically too. And sometimes I sing random songs that somebody in secondary school from now, I'll be like, this girl, you've come again with this your secondary school songs. But it was really my first opportunity to kind of learn spiritual leadership, because by SS1 I was an ESCO in fellowship. By SS2 I was SS2 third time I was chapel president, chapel prefect, SU president. At first she was SU SCM. And some of those people leading them scared me. If you think you're a leader, go and try and lead teenagers when you're a teenager. So I told, but I said, by the time I finished, I told God, God, I don't want any form of spiritual leadership again. But then when I entered uni and I met my now husband, around the time we met, shortly after we met, was when his fellowship TTYF, which is now Celebration Church, started in 2008. So
which, by the way,
yeah,
I was part of.
Yes, you were part of. You were. Oh my God, seems like yesterday. But even then, it just really prepared me. I think I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. And I can also see the connection between that, because I was going to ask about like finding your own, like being okay with being who you are, with your individuality and your own authenticity and all of that. And I don't know, I may be wrong, but I think it kind of connects to that, because when everybody, like, you're not part of the cool kids, you know, and you're totally fine with that.
I think that one of the best things you can give yourself is not being dependent on other people for validation. I think it's one of the best gifts you can give yourself, not being dependent. Then I used to find it so weird. Even now, I find it weird when people are easily pressured by other people, because I'm like, you're not even a child. But even as a child, I couldn't understand why they will say this one is most popular, so everybody must follow this person. Like, think for yourself. And it was something that I think I also kind of took from home as well, where we were really encouraged as children to think for ourselves, stand up for our own values. And I think that is so important. Of course, some people carry individuality to the extreme, where they say things like, do what makes you happy, do you. But I'm more of do God. What's God's will for you? I think that's a great place to start, because I would always say that I don't really know much about the devil being in the details, but if you look at the extremes, you'll find him there. So individuality that stems from knowing who I am in Christ, I think, is the most important thing. And knowing God at an early age, I think that does that for you, where you're really able to find him for yourself, so that when you do come into a community, you understand the role of that community in your growth. But and community does play a major part in your growth. So I don't believe in knowing God for yourself but not having a local church.
Exactly.
Because even from scriptures, everybody who believed in Christ was added to the church. When you see letters written by the apostles, they are written to churches. But I truly believe that knowing God for yourself gives you the wisdom and the grace to be able to stand up for what is right, even when there are not many people around you who are doing the same thing, and to be able to contribute in a healthy way when you do find a community that you trust.
Do you know, I remember something you said. I think I was in 100 level, and you were like hall chaplain or something. I don't know, but you used to come to the hall to talk to us.
Esther Hall.
Yes.
Okay, I was Esther Hall chaplain then. I was when I was in 400.
And you said something. You were like, if you are trying to be everybody, who is now going to be you?
Exactly.
Something like that.
Yes.
And it's just stuck in my head. I just remembered.
Because you're really the only one that can be you. And that is so beautiful. Someone said something about the fact that even if you are the best version of somebody else, you're still a copycat version. You're still number 2. You're the best person at being you. And that's the truth.
Wow. So I want to go back to the story of your dad.
Okay.
He was a good guy before he gave his life to Christ.
Yes,
and then once he gave his life to Christ, how did that affect your family and the whole family dynamic here?
So my dad is generally a calm person. Yeah. So even when he wasn't born again, he would drive us to church and go home, then come back and pick us up. I think my mom was really the person who really pushed for spiritual growth, especially in those early years. I do believe that it must have been easier for her when he finally joined her. But I think that, so the change was there, but I don't think it went from 0 to 100 because of my mom. I believe it was already because of my mom and the personality of my dad. He's the nicest person, just very. So I think that kind of really just helped us from a very early age. But just really growing up to now see the example that he was as a believer, I believe that might also have impacted me, maybe even in ways I might not be able to spell out in this interview.
Yes. Okay, so I think that brings me to the question of, as a believer, life happens, things happen, and you find yourself, well, maybe after you get married, the woman gets saved first, and then you're married, find yourself married to an unbeliever. What word would you say to someone who is in that situation where you're believing God for the salvation of somebody who is, maybe it's your spouse, maybe it's your parent, or somebody that you cannot just easily say, I beg, I'm done with this person, like you're tied to the person for life. So how do you...
I think I'll start with the question that you didn't ask me, which would be that if you are saved, don't be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. That's the first place to start. And I know some people will say, what about this person's brother, sister that married? Because I don't even think my mom was herself saved when they first got married. I think she got saved after they had gotten married. So somebody will say things like, oh, I know somebody who married somebody that was not born again and changed him. And one thing I always say is build your life on principles, not exceptions. That said, if you're already in a situation like this, I think that one thing you must do is put your absolute trust in God, who himself saved you. And knowing that if not for his grace and his mercy, this might not be a decision that you would have made. And so it means that if, like Paul said, if Jesus Christ died to save sinners, of whom I am chief, it means that he also has the ability to save this other person. But when it comes to evangelizing to people that are close to us, many times our actions matter as much as our words. I don't believe in evangelism across board that is just follow my life. So when people say things like preach the gospel, if necessary, use words, I believe that you should always use words to preach the gospel. It's like saying cook food, if necessary, use ingredients. So I believe that when it comes to preaching generally, we need to emphasize the preaching of the gospel with words, which is what the Bible instructs. But when it comes to relating with people who are in your space, a sibling, a wife, a husband, the truth is these people are going to see you up close and personal. So the ability to really be an example consistently over time, I think that is so incredibly important. But I also think that you shouldn't get used to not having conversations about faith. Because there's a way... I have a friend who, I think by God's grace, I was a resident pastor at the time. And that month across CCI Global, we were teaching on evangelism. And her mom was a Muslim. And you know how you can have conversations with people, but after a while, you don't want it to affect the relationship. So
So we
you
just keep
just
that part
you just skip
out.
that part. You talk about everything else but that. But I remember she said after that message, she said, "Let me even have this conversation with mommy." And now the woman is a church member and believes in Jesus. So don't shy away from those conversations, but make sure that you're an example and trust God to lead you, especially as regards what, how, and when. But you have to consistently be an example. That's where the work is.
Yeah.
I also think that really just praying for people. What that does is, I remember going for evangelism one time. And I think that was when we used to have the earlier reboot camps, and in those days we used to have a full day where you just go on evangelism. And before I left, Donna told me something about a particular woman and her family, that I was going to meet this woman. So when I met her, she wasn't sure if she wanted to be receptive, but as soon as I told her this is what God told me, she said, "Hey, how do you know?" She was now more open. So I truly believe that praying for people and trusting God to lead and direct you and to open your eyes to see what direction to go, um, I think that helps. So even if Peter's mother-in-law did not believe in Jesus before, by the time he comes to the house and he heals her, she will get up and serve. So I think all those things work hand in hand.
So I think that it's also, from what you're saying, like the story of Peter's mother-in-law's healing, you have to also be committed to your own spiritual growth.
Yeah. And to be brave enough to walk in your office as a son or daughter of God. Because sometimes,
not as a pastor.
Yes, even as a pastor at times. So what I mean by this is sometimes, Jesus went to his village, and they say, we know him now. We used to see him when he was wearing that walking up and down. He's now tall. See you, you're a man. Wow. So there is a familiarity when it comes to people who are close to us. But when I talk about working in your office, I mean, you need to see yourself beyond, I'm just the son, or I'm just the daughter. You should see yourself as a priest to that home. And when you do, there are some things that happen, and you're no longer saying, "Oh, what do we do?" You're crying. You are standing in your office and declaring the word of God. And when you walk in power like that, you realize that you are the gift of God to that person and to that family. And it kind of changes dynamics. But if you just see yourself as, I'm just the last born, and so there are things happening in your family, but you're not taking authority, it now becomes even more difficult. But when they see that you take authority, and when you take authority, things happen because you're doing it in the name of Jesus. So that also changes dynamics as well.
Like I said, I saw a clip where Pastor was talking about your dad.
Okay.
I know. Like, how did that affect you? Because a lot of women have trauma and they say daddy issues, but clearly yours was like the direct opposite.
Yes,
So
I concur.
so how would you say, like, have you been able to like reflect on it and think about how it affected
I think
your
I still did
relationship?
yesterday.
Okay.
Because of course nobody's perfect and nobody has. I, for example, had seasons in my teenage years where I had issues with low self-esteem. But I think that was all part of growing up and not necessarily a daddy issue kind of thing. And it didn't push me to an extreme where I made the wrong choices or decisions. But I'm grateful to God I was loved at home. I really was. And then my father, like I said, nobody's perfect. But I think he and my mom wanted to create an environment where we as children could speak up for ourselves. So things like don't look your parents in the eye, or things like your parents can never apologize to you, or things like your dad will not say I love you. They were firm and whenever they needed to be firm. Like I remember the one time my dad actually spanked me. Up till now, I still remember what I did. And after that day, I never tried that kind of rubbish again. But I think it was once. But there was really just this idea that he and my mom wanted to instill in us, which is your voice matters. And I think that for raising, when it comes to raising three daughters, that is so important. So of course be respectful. Of course, don't speak out of turn, but your voice matters. So don't ever feel like there are questions you can't ask, or there are places that you're not worthy to be in. And I think just really having my dad around, kind of he didn't cook, but he was domesticated in the sense that maybe he would wash socks, or he was just really very, very hands-on. And then of course there were times where he needed to travel outside of Lagos for work. But it was a conversation that he and my mom had about ensuring that they made us feel valued in terms of having our opinions. So for example, we wanted to make a decision, we want to make some decisions, they would sit us down. I remember my 10th birthday, my parents called me because I wanted to get a computer and I wanted a party. And they called me to my room and said, so we don't really have so much money. Please choose between the computer and the party. Sometimes I still feel embarrassed about it because I was like, okay, can't we do the computer and a small party? And I remember them not necessarily berating me and saying, your own is too much. Why do you? Because you had asked my opinion. And they went out of their way to get it done. But even if they hadn't, they were incredible enough to kind of hear me out and know where I was coming from. And I know that after that day, I never asked for a party again because I could see that they had made a lot of sacrifices to make it happen. So I think just really him being present, him respecting my mom, and then just us being able to have conversations. I think those things like all this, you can't look your parents in the eye, you can't ask this. It was kind of really strange for me, and I think that did help, so that even when I was in situations where they weren't around, I could trust myself enough to make the right decisions because they had shown me that they could trust me. Of course, they were not negligent. They were not negligent at all. There were some things. There were some things. I was just sitting there in church recently about how even for my husband's family house, I wasn't allowed to sleep there until I got married. So the first time we had, because ministry started 2 years before we got married, and I was already a pastor in ministry then. And the first time we had a crossover service, my mom said, you can't sleep there. Until you are married, you can't sleep in his family house. And church was very close to my husband's family house. So I had to convince our people that they should stay in church because of me. And then in the morning I went. So I remember the next year, it was October, and I was thinking, how do I do for crossover service now? Where do I stay? Then it occurred to me I was getting married in November, and I was already going to be married by crossover service, right? So they did have those values, and really they were quite disciplined. But I think they also really made us know that we mattered, and they did their best to correct from a place of love.
And did that affect your own expectations going into marriage? Like, what was the kind of marriage that your parents
So I will say what my husband said, because I'm usually very careful about talking about personal marriage experiences. So I will say what my husband said in a message that he preached. He said there was a time he and my dad, because my parents still come to my house every weekend to help with the kids. We still have a great relationship. He said there was a time he was there, my dad was there, and he said, you need the space of an hour. My father had pecked me like 3 times. So he was like, and then he came and he he did his own. So in some sense it did. But my husband is my husband, my dad is my dad. They are both incredible people, different in some sense, but I think I would still choose my husband. It might not be exactly my dad, but he's a really great guy.
Yeah.
And then in the areas that he's needed to grow, he's continued to grow. So maybe in a sense it did, but I'm grateful for who I married, because my parents will support you in anything you do, but they were kind of conservative in terms of, are you sure? Are you sure? And it was good because it kind of helped me make sure I thought through decisions. But my husband was more outside the box. Just so he kind of really pushed me and mentored me in bravery. I was never timid. So because of the stability of my home, I had confidence, but I tended to be conservative. But my husband really pushed me to like have a broader perspective about life. So I think the combination of both of them has kind of really helped me, because when my husband also wants to do stuff too, I'm kind of the voice of reason. Let's take a step back. Let's take it. And so I think we kind of balance each other out in that way, where he is more introspective because of me and my background, and I tend to be bolder and braver because of him and his background. So I think it all worked out well in the end.
So nice. Pastor Iren is amazing.
Yeah, he is an incredible person.
Yeah. How would you say you're raising your children in this, this time that we are living in? You have 4 children. That's like
a lot.
A lot.
I would say God is helping us. And one thing we must realize is that the events of this age don't take God by surprise. Like, he knew everything that would be happening, and he still said that our children will sit with the enemies at the gates and not be ashamed. He still said, I will contend with those that contend with you, and I will save your children. In the time where Timothy grew up, let's not even talk about the atrocities committed by the Romans and other people in that age. But yet, Paul talked about the legacy of faith passed from his mother and his grandmother, Eunice and Lois. So even when darkness abounds, light shines in the darkness and darkness cannot comprehend it. And so I've learned not to parent from a place of fear. Of course, there is a sense in which you are like, God, you have to help me. But there's also a sense in which you are like, the help of God is really enough. So when we say by God's grace or God help me, these are not just vocal fillers, they are real things. Somebody that is helped by God in parenting, you won't fail. But it's always a learning curve, because children will listen to what you say but do what you do. So having to consistently be an example, and then to be intentional about raising them. I think my husband traveled for a bit, and I sent him a video of us having devotion, and everybody was holding shekere, including the baby. Right? So we're trying to be more intentional with family devotion nowadays. And then just really show them this God that we know and love. So for us, ministry is beyond work. It is a lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle that, as much as possible, we try to make our children a part of, as much as is within their capacity and within what they are able. So sometimes you might hear one of them say, I want to be a pastor like mommy, or mommy's working, I want to work too. And then once in a while we try to get them to listen to messages, get them to be part of our lives as much as possible, although there are times when they are with the grandparents. So but just really learning to balance it, and just really being intentional, and understanding that every child is different. So even if you have experience in raising children, I can assure you, if you have another child now, you don't have experience in raising that particular child. So really getting to know your children as persons too. And then finding that balance between discipline and love, or that combination of discipline and love. Because if you don't discipline children, you don't love them. But disciplining also from a place not of anger, but of, I love you and I want you to do more. So for example, I think I had come back from somewhere, and the two younger girls, Edima and Nadia, came, and they said, I think it was Nadia first, said, Mommy, I did something and I came to report myself. And then I realized it was she and her sister that did it, and they had come to report themselves. So I think later, so I kind of corrected them. I gave them work to do, to discipline them. And then later, Edima was asking me, so how was your day? I said, it was fine, except that when I came back from a long day, two short girls had done something, and I had to discipline them. And she said, oh, well, that's not discipline. You were just trying to make us better. Right? So I think God is helping us to do a good job, but there will always be those moments where you would realize there's still more to do. And so you're not expecting perfection, but there is a beauty in progress when it comes to parenting. And just really also making sure that your children are open to you as much as possible. I think that helps. And then just really getting to know them, so that in the areas where this person needs help, you're able to shine the light on that. And
you spoke about how like your parents make sure that like try to encourage you guys to be outspoken and all of that. As a parent, are you finding that it's not easy? Because sometimes
someone said something. They said if you have girls, they will not stop talking. And if you have boys, they never stop moving. And I'm not going to lie. Edima Nadia, if you're watching this, and Nasara, of course. But Nasara is kind of on the quiet side. She's learning to word up more. But I concur. Because my son is always, he has projects. He's 16 months, but he has projects in different parts of the house. And he knows where those projects are. And he's always going to walk there. Always something to break, something to push. Something like yesterday, I was trying to feed him, and he just came down, and there were clothes on the chair, and he just put all the clothes on the floor and just went about his life like, okay, now I'm done with that. What's next?
Why?
But I think that one might not always get the opportunity to listen to your kids, and so there's sometimes when you're like, okay, I need a break, I need to rest. Sometimes I say I'm all mommed out for the day, and someone say, are you saying you don't want to be a man? I said, I'm not saying I don't want to be a mom. I just need a little break so I can rest. So those moments I think are incredible and important for every mom. But in the midst of that, still giving them as many opportunities as possible to know that they are heard. I think that that's important, giving feedback on the conversations that they have with you. So I think it's in the midst of how difficult parenting can sometimes be, it is a fruitful, productive labor. Because yes, I do ministry, and I'm grateful to God for the opportunity to be a pastor. Grateful to God for the opportunity to be a filmmaker, to counsel people. But really, my children have only one mother, and so it means that I must treat this assignment with even more serious treat the others. And then we may not really just always have the opportunity to hear them speak to us as often as they do now. Time flies.
Yeah.
Sometimes I look at my kids and say, I just gave birth to you yesterday. Why? How did you get so big? I know that even though I'm really close to my mom, today she called me, she said, what's going on? We've not spoken in a while. I said, Mommy, I'm fine. I've just been so busy, right? But to be in the same house with your children and to speak to them on a day-to-day, that's a privilege. And I hope that even in the midst of the challenges that come with parenting, is something that we never take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finally, let's talk about A to ZL.
Okay.
You're very creative. You have like many expressions. How does your spirituality influence your creativity? Like how, or should I say, what's your creative process like? How do you, does it connect with your spirituality, or is it
So I'll start from storytelling.
okay?
So there are times when I might tend to note that the Lord will have me address a particular issue. And it may not be that I see a vision. It may be that I counsel people. And as I counsel people, I realize that this is something that is needed, because I'm like, I wish I had a material that I could refer them to. So for example, I have this video on my channel, Mistakes Good Guys Make. And in that season, there was just a burden on my heart for men, because I was seeing good men just make some mistakes over and over and over again. And I was like, I wish somebody could tell them some of these things. So normally more females than males watch my channel, but that particular video had a lot of guys. So there's that. There are times when I just sense a nudge that I need to cover this aspect of storytelling. So for example, I'm going to do a film sometime this year about an atheist feminist. And it's because somehow the Lord will just put me either through Kairos moments or through impressions in my spirit, or through people I speak to address some certain issues. So when I have that, I might just write it down in my notes. So for example, the 2 films we've done this year for YouTube, because we're doing YouTube films this year, I think it took me a week each to write the screenplay, which is a really short time, because even screenplays I've written in 2 months, I would say it took me a short time, but this one, it took me maybe a week each. But before I settled down to write, I had the ideas in my spirit for a long time. And so many times I would just, as I'm busy going about my day, I might just brood over it. And then if I have one scene or one thing I think will work, I might just write it somewhere. And then when it's now maybe time to begin or get to at least start planning for pre-production, and now really settle down to write. So I think that's majorly it. But because of my training as a journalist, I've also got into that aspect where I also see writing as work. So it's beyond, I don't have inspiration, then I close my laptop. No. Because when I worked in the newspaper, if a story is supposed to go out tomorrow, your editor is not asking you, do you have inspiration, do you have writer's block? He's asking you, where is it before the paper goes to bed. So bringing in that discipline into the stories that I now tell for the Lord has also really, really, really helped me. So I think inspiration does come from a large number of places. There are times when just by praying in tongues, things are clearer in my spirit about how to go about things. Another way clarity comes is by writing. So I think someone said you know what you know by writing, or something like that. So you're able to, it is by writing you figure out what you know. And so just really saying, okay, I'm going to write this when I start. So I might have had maybe a five line idea, but as long as I'm in that zone where I'm now writing it, it's going to expand. So I think that's kind of basically it. And they're just some things that come to me easily. So for example, the ads I did for our 3-in-1 virtual cinema last year, I was like, oh, what do I do differently about this one? So I had this really nice one with Pastor Dami Praiseworth, where we did a re-singing of the 3-in-1 virtual cinema thing. And I wanted to, for that ad, try to figure out what his strength was as a musician and what my strength was in terms of, by God's grace, sometimes having elements of humor, and in a way that could tell that story for sales. So, and then when it came to Pastor Shola, Olale, the one we did together, we have these alter egos where we rap. And I wanted to just do something different, but still show a side of both of us that's so in large number of places. But I think eventually it comes from the Lord.
Yeah. Why is storytelling important?
That is such a good question. I think that stories change our minds by targeting our hearts. So, for example, if we ask you, Flourish, do you think stealing is bad? You're going to say yes, it's really bad. It's a sin, it's a crime. But then you watch Money Heist and you are able to relate with the characters. And you're like, please let them not catch them. Let them not catch them. They should run. Because what storytelling does is it always starts from the known to the unknown. So, for example, if you're watching, say, LGBTQ content, you might be like, what's this? This is sinful. But then they now show you a relationship dynamic between a man and another man that is somehow related to what you have with your husband. So they have a fight. And it's maybe might be similar to a fight that you and your spouse have had, or their child is sick, and it's similar to something that you have experienced. And so even though you don't connect with them on the core of what they're trying to share, there are other elements to which you connect. And so if you can carry people from the known to the unknown, that is how you change minds by targeting hearts. So we must continue to do that with the Lord stories. So even if people cannot relate to Jesus, they can relate to love. They can relate to having an African parent. They can relate to loss. So we start from there, and then we move to some of the things that we really want to share. I just revealed something that I feel like this should have been a private conversation. But anyway, so that's storytellers out there, right? Yeah. And then just really good storytelling does not discriminate, because you can watch films about a time that you have not lived in, with costumes that are weird that you will never wear. But there's something about the feelings, the emotions, the experiences of the people in that time that you can relate with. That's just powerful.
Thank you so much, PL. I'm so happy.
Thank you so much. I had a really good time. Thanks for having me.